As we've been working to help people improve their longevity, to be able to stay on their bike longer and live healthier lifestyles, that we noticed that there are certain patterns to the way they do things, and that by tweaking just small little bits of those patterns, we can help them make big sweeping changes in their overall health and wellness.
Lube your chain and pump up those tires. It's time for Aging on Dirt, where we defy expectations one pedal stroke at a time. We age, but we don't have to get old, and we all want to experience the joy of mountain biking as long as possible. Are you starting to ride at an unreasonable age, getting back into it after a long layoff, or just wanting to extend how long you'll be riding? Then you're in the right place. And now, your host, Joel Zeeve.
I am so excited to have Dr. Cameron Garber on the show today, and you'll be too. I think he's the perfect guest to help us understand how to stay active and experience the joy on our bikes as we continue to age. Today, we'll be talking about what he calls the 6 patterns of healthy living. Those are eating, movement, sleep, stress, gratitude/happiness, and social. All in one episode. We can do it, can't we? Cameron's a physical therapist, the owner of Body Smart in South Ogden, Utah. And there he helps people live longer and stronger lives. He does this by helping us improve our mindset and skills that are needed in order to be that guy or that gal that we see riding on the trails well into our 80s, all without having the fear of injury or burnout. So welcome, Dr. Cameron Garber.
Well, thank you so much. That's a wonderful intro. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, thanks for being on the show again. This is going to be number 3 for you. We're making this a habit.
I like it. I love sharing. So anytime, I'm happy to share.
Well, you are a wealth of information.
Well, thanks.
For sure. How do you want to start this? We've got 6 great patterns, and I really can't wait to kind of dive into them. You just want to go into that order that I read them off on?
Yeah. So that's, it seems overwhelming to think, oh man, that's 6 different topics is a lot to talk about. So like you said, those different patterns. So our eating pattern, our movement pattern, sleep, stress, gratitude and happiness, and social, like each of those we could talk for at least a half hour on, right?
I bet.
And so each is such a critical role, but we found that everything kind of boils down to one of those patterns, that in some way, shape, or form, those patterns are what really is shaping how we behave and the habits that we have. And so really, we call our collection of habits these patterns, because we found that when we track people's lifestyle, we see that they have certain patterns in them. And so as we've been working to help people improve their longevity, to be able to stay on their bike longer and live healthier lifestyles, that we noticed that there are certain patterns to the way they do things, and that by tweaking just small little bits of those patterns, we can help them make big sweeping changes in their overall health and wellness, in their life and lifestyle. And so that's kind of the idea. It's not that any one of those things is like the key thing, but they seem to all really interplay with one another into how people lead a healthy lifestyle.
Could you substitute the word pattern for habit, or are you thinking those are different things?
Well, yeah. So our habits, I would say our pattern is kind of our collection of habits. Our pattern is what we tend to do when life happens. We kind of fall back to our regular patterns. So we often will break pattern for certain periods of time. It's like, oh, I want to lose some weight. And so we break our pattern and we try to do something that's not our regular pattern for a period of time. Mm-hmm. And then we tend to kind of get fatigued and frustrated with that because it was too big of a change too quickly. And so then we fall back into that same collection of habits that become kind of our lifestyle pattern. And so these different lifestyle patterns in these different areas, we break them down by those different areas. By tracking those patterns, it helps us identify where are the things that I can modify in my current pattern to create a healthier pattern. So I'll give you an example. I had this one client who had these Wednesday meetings every Wednesday. And so as we were looking over her patterns, we had her track her eating pattern. I noticed every Wednesday you have a burger, shake, and fries. Not that that's necessarily bad, although it's a lot of your calories. It's about a day and a half's worth of calories in one day.
In one meal, right?
In one meal, yeah. But there could be a reason why that's a legitimate thing to do. So let's talk about it. What leads to this burger, shake, and fries every Wednesday? And it turns out that she was responsible for gathering all of these numbers for like an executive board meeting. So it was a super stressful thing because all the bigwigs in the company would rely on her to pull numbers during this meeting. So they'd bring something up and they'd turn to her and be like, what are the financials on this? Or what are the, this and that and the other. Super stressful for her. She was under the gun. And if she didn't get it quickly enough, it was lagging through the meeting. And so then it was so stressful for her that she would have this burger, shake, and fries as kind of her emotional reward for having made it through that meeting one more week. And so I followed up with that and said, I noticed then that your exercise pattern, that Wednesdays you don't typically exercise. Why is that? And she's like, oh, I'm just so tired from being so stressed out. So I was like, okay, so this affects the stress pattern too. And I was like, well, if you're tired, does that mean you didn't sleep well? Oh, no, I sleep terribly that night. And so then I just don't have the energy to wake up and exercise. And so now we're going, look, this is affecting all of your patterns. It's affecting your movement pattern. It's affecting your sleep, your stress. She's not very happy in her job because she was stressed out all the time.
Mm-hmm. All 6 patterns were affected from this one meeting.
And so it was fascinating. By making one little tweak, though, I didn't say, let's change your job or let's overhaul your life and lifestyle, which we often do when we're unsatisfied in our job. We feel unrecognized and stressed out and all these things. And so we often make a big sweeping change in our life that further disrupts our patterns. Where instead I just said, well, let's talk about this. These numbers that you have to pull. Is there a way that you could find out what numbers people need before the meeting? Could you send an email out Monday morning that says, hey, what numbers does everyone want to see for the meeting? And I'll prepare them and get them back to you so that we're ready to go for the meeting. So she did that the next week. Everybody got back to her. She was able to prepare the numbers, get them to everybody on Tuesday. She slept soundly. She wasn't stressed for the meeting. She got up and worked out, and she was able to prepare a lunch that she brought with her and eat that lunch instead. So part of it was identifying the pattern. Just pointing that out can often make a big difference.
Yeah, because you don't see it, or we don't always see it. It takes a third party to see these things sometimes.
Sometimes we have to zoom out and take that 30,000 foot view of our life to see like what are the things that are causing me headaches? What are causing my stressors, or what, where am I overeating, or whatever that pattern is that we're looking at. That 30,000 foot view can sometimes be seen a little bit better by somebody else than ourselves. So when we zoom out and take that 30,000 foot view with somebody else, sometimes they can more easily point out those little tweaks that we can make. So by changing just one thing, she wrote an email that she sent out to everybody, wound up making a massive change in her job satisfaction. She received a lot more social praise. So everybody was like, oh man, that was such a great idea. The meeting went so much better. So she got a lot more recognition and praise. She was happier. She was more grateful for her job and for the people that she worked with. And she slept better, had less stress, ate better, and was able to exercise. So it shifted all of those patterns by just a 1% change. One simple email that made all the difference in the world for her.
Right. I'm curious why isn't work one of the patterns?
That's a great question. I think because work has so many different aspects to it. There are the social aspects of it, and there are more of the happiness, the stress, all of those things. So we first created a huge list of all of the areas of life that we could consider tracking and consider like making behavior change in. And when we boiled it all down, it all kind of fit into these 6 categories in some way, shape, or form. Or many things like work fit multiple of those categories.
Gotcha.
And so we found that by tracking our stressors, for example, some of those stressors came from the home environment, some of them came from the work environment, some of them came just from our social environment even. But we could more easily track that and then make just subtle 1% changes. So a lot of what we do in those 6 areas,
Okay.
and so they track for 2 weeks is all. And then we look back through that and see, are there any patterns that we can find? Let's start there at just identifying what are some patterns. And a lot of correction comes in them just recognizing their stressor and their response, or the food items that they ate, and whether or not those were, choices in line with their goals or not. And so a lot of correction happens just in increasing someone's awareness of their pattern.
Oh, I bet. So have you ever had someone say, writing down and tracking my stress is causing me stress?
Yeah, we have for sure. And that's why we only do it for about 2 weeks at a time for each pattern.
Okay.
Because I like calorie counting, for example. I'm not a big fan of calorie counting, or food tracking even. But to have somebody track their just what they eat, we don't even have them calorie count. We just have them track what they eat for 2 weeks, just as a good thought exercise of increasing their awareness and being able to see certain patterns like that burger, shake, and fries every Wednesday, or man, every time I get bored in the afternoons, I go and get a cookie from the cafeteria or whatever that is, right? And it may just be that it's a boredom thing. And so having them write that down, and so we go through those patterns and I have them star everything that they felt like, hey, that was a healthy behavior that I want to continue. And I have them circle anything that was like, that's probably something I'd like to avoid doing again in the future.
Okay.
So I try not to label it as good and bad, but more of what are things in line with my goals and what are things that are leading me away from my goals. Let's say that I had an apple in the evening as a snack instead of a cookie or a donut or a whatever. So they self-identified, hey, that was a better choice. I was like, okay, great. So how do we make sure that you do that again? What are some of the steps we can take to make sure that those apples are available and that's what you choose instead of the cookie or the donut or the sleeve of Oreos or whatever that is, right?
Right.
Not that those things are, again, necessarily bad, but when that becomes your regular pattern, that in the evening, I get a hankering for something sweet, and so I go grab a sleeve of Oreos, calories wise and goals wise, that usually isn't in line with our long-term goals, even though they taste delicious.
Right.
Maybe I pull that apple out after dinner and set it on the counter so that when I go back into the kitchen, that's what I first see instead of the sleeve of Oreos in the pantry.
Right.
Or, so it's just finding out for each person individually, what is it going to be that helps me reinforce the positive behaviors and avoid those behaviors that aren't in line with my goals.
They've seen that themselves, and then it's more likely they're gonna adapt to the new pattern.
Exactly.
Versus you just telling them, hey, don't eat the cookie, eat the apple instead.
Right. And we workshop together a solution that they feel like would actually work for them. And again, it's a 1% change versus a wholesale change. So if I told somebody, really science has shown that eating a plant-based diet with meat very sparingly, it leads to the best possible outcomes. And so I think you should switch to a plant-based diet. how
That's
likely
more than 1% change, isn't it?
right, right. That's a huge sweeping change. Now you've become a different person at family gatherings and barbecues with friends and all those other things. Like, you fundamentally changed who you are and how you interact with other people by making that big of a change. And so that's such an uncomfortable change because it's so big. Same idea with like, oh, I want to lose weight, and so I'm going to go to the gym every day this week. You've become a whole different person. It's such a big shift in our pattern to do something extreme like that versus just saying, I'm going to make a 1% change. And that's the idea, is let's make smaller changes in several areas of our life that add up to being big sweeping changes that we're comfortable making.
Gotcha.
Right? Because sometimes a 1% change can make a 5% difference.
Mhm.
Like that one email, I would argue, only changed what she did in her life by a few percentage points, maybe. But the outcome was a 60% outcome, right?
Right.
So that's the idea in identifying our patterns, and those 1% little things that we can change in our pattern. We can make big changes in our life.
I can see how all 6 are very tightly interwoven.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm not exercising regularly, if I'm not finding time to ride the bike, I'm probably going to be a little bit more irritable. I'm going to be less exhausted at the end of the day, so I'm not going to sleep quite as well. I'm going to, I won't have had that mental health clearing time that I normally get on the bike. And so
Right.
our activity or movement pattern is critical, that I have regular times in my day that I am active and that I move my body, both intentionally as part of exercise, but also kind of unintentionally as part of my lifestyle. And the more that I do my intentional exercise movement, the more likely I am to feel good, to want to do the other movement. I'm less likely to sit and watch TV in the evening if I have been up and moving and I'm strong and vibrant because of my fitness. I'm more likely to go walk the dog or to go play with my grandkids or, do something active, work in the yard instead of just sitting and watch TV. But the days
Right.
where I don't get as much exercise in, I also tend to be more sedentary. It's funny how that goes.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
but if we can identify those kind of pieces of our pattern and where we're at in our pattern, and instead of saying, "Oh man, I've been so lazy lately. I'm going to go out and ride my bike every day this week," and then maybe not do that and fail it and feel like, "Oh, I'm such a bum. I told myself I was going to do it and I didn't." And so we get that negative, spiral that we get caught in. Instead, it's seeing where our pattern is. And instead of saying, "I should be vegan," saying, "What if I just incorporate one more vegetable into my diet each day?" And then maybe it turns into each meal. And then maybe it's, I'm going to try to have a meal where I eat mostly plants. Or, it just depends on where we're at and how we build up for us.
Right.
But
Yep.
if we tell
Everybody's different.
somebody, yeah, everybody's different. Our lifestyle, our pattern is different. But if I tell you, yeah, you should be eating a plant-based diet, or you should be vegan, or you should be keto, or you should be whatever it is, it's too big of a change too quickly, and the likelihood that we're going to stick with that is too big. So I often say that with these patterns, we often try to make it too complicated. That behavior change and health improvement and living a healthy lifestyle is often very simple, but it doesn't mean that it's easy. So we often overcomplicate the what of what we need to do. And we kind of know already some of the basics of our patterns and what we tend to do, or our stress. It's like, oh, I know I should de-stress, but I've just got so much to do. And then we run our battery so low instead of taking time to do, some self-care type things that recharge our batteries, help us feel more energized and give us more ability to handle those stressors better. We tend to just dig ourselves a hole instead. And so,
Well, and I see how you can take something that's a big change. That's a 20 or 30% change, I guess the example I'm thinking about is like New Year's resolutions. It's so big
Yeah.
that it's easy to either, okay, well, I just failed at that, so I'm going to forget the whole thing. Or it's, I started it, but I just couldn't follow through with it because it was such a big thing.
Yeah. So,
It,
right. So we talk about that all the time, like a New Year's resolution. Are they good or bad or indifferent, you know? And I think the idea behind them is great. The way we execute that is often poor. So a New Year's resolution is meant to be for a whole year. So if I want to get back to the gym as part of my New Year's resolution, why does it have to be all in January?
right.
What if it was, I want to get back to riding my bike and being able to, really enjoy a whole day of mountain biking where I'm riding up and cruising down. That's my New Year's resolution. But who's to say that that can't take all 12 months before we're there,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if we got there 12 months from now where we were consistently riding and could enjoy a whole day out on the mountain, how happy would we be? But we tend to hit it really hard in January, not be able to get there, and then we bail on it because we bit off more than we could chew. And
Right.
so it's giving ourselves a little bit of grace to say, I'm just going to make a 1% change in the direction of my New Year's resolution. In breaking it down and saying, what are 12 steps, one a month steps that are small changes that I can take to get me to that New Year's resolution so that I am a gym goer by the end of the year, or that I do go out and ride my bike by the end of the year, or that I have eaten a more plant-based diet by the end of the year. But it may not be perfect, and that's okay, right?
Right.
Or, whatever that is. I use the plant-based diet because that's just a popular one right now. I'm not necessarily advocating that we should all be eating plant-based diets and whatever. Although we probably should.
The story for another podcast.
Right. But
So,
yeah, we all are where we are, and that's okay to be there. And we should love ourselves enough to not leave ourselves there, though, and start making that steady progress in the direction we want to head and not beat ourselves up so much that we're not there yet.
okay. Do you have any other stories from clients that you can share that impacted multiple patterns, like we started the podcast with?
So we see this all the time. So I had another gentleman who liked to mountain bike. He also liked to play frisbee golf and all these other things, but had kind of gotten away from that. And he was in his early 40s, and just life and stressful jobs and things, and a sedentary job kind of got him to where he wasn't doing that anymore. And he even had family members who had died fairly young and had severe liver problems, fatty liver disease, and other things like that. And he was starting to develop the same kind of flank pain and other problems that he'd had some of his family members have. And so it scared him a little bit that was happening. And so when we sat him down and talked through some of these things and was like, look, we're not going to make a wholesale sweeping change in your life all at once. So just buckle up. That's not the way we do things here. Let's just make some subtle pattern changes. And we started to change just a few things. We started with his activity pattern and found some activities that he could do that didn't increase his pain, that didn't increase his joint pain and kind of systemic inflammation, but that he also enjoyed doing and supported the activities that he loved to do. So we got him, doing some strength training exercises that supported cycling and frisbee golf.
Okay.
And so that started
he could see some benefits from the work that he was putting in.
Right. And then that helped him be more motivated to want to sleep better and to eat better. And so it was subtle changes, one thing at a time. And for him, the focus was on activity. So we focused on that activity pattern, but that led into more interest into, he could see that the next step that I have to take to improve my activities is I got to start eating a little bit better. And he actually voluntarily gave up alcohol altogether. That wasn't something I pushed him to do. That wasn't
Mhm.
something we said. And we made sure that he didn't just go cold turkey with that, because the likelihood that he'd stick with that, I talked with him and said, make sure that if it's a, a family gathering or family function or things like that, and that's something that you would otherwise do and want to do, like, don't restrict yourself to the point that it's going to make it so you don't do this long term. Right. So instead,
Right.
just say, maybe I'm going to limit it to this amount, and I'm going to whatever. And so he was able to do that, and he was able to see the differences in the way he felt. And so it was interesting how that's quite naturally kind of moved to the next thing. Once he kind of started eating better and felt how much more energy that gave him, he was like, man, what I'm noticing is that I'm still just not sleeping well. So how do we help my sleep? And so we just kind of naturally progressed from one topic to the next.
Right.
And it made a big change in his overall lifestyle, to where he's really healthy and happy now. And funny enough, his mom actually just called me today. His wife came in at one point, and now his mom just called me today saying, what you've done for him is amazing. I would love some of that.
Great.
So kind of interesting. I guess that's why he was on my brain as far as sharing his story.
Oh, sure.
But it is interesting how just making changes in some of those patterns can inspire us to make changes in those other patterns as well.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
yeah, that snowball effect.
Sure. That's a great high-level overview of all 6 of those, really. Like you said, we could probably spend a half hour in each one if we wanted to. I didn't realize how interrelated all 6 of them were, so this has been real educational for me, for sure. You got a good way to kind of summarize and wrap this up?
Yeah, so I would say that when we're thinking about the patterns that we live in our lifestyle, we got to think, am I making decisions about what I'm doing in each of these patterns? Or am I just reacting to my environment? So much of what we're doing in kind of helping people work through their different patterns, whether that's your eating pattern, your movement pattern, your sleep, your stress, your gratitude and happiness, or your social patterns, so much of what happens in our life is we just react to what's happening around us.
Oh, I
And
believe
so
that.
and so we always say, let's try to make decisions instead of just reactions. So if it's about our sleep health, we tend to just go right back to our same patterns of the way we sleep. And so, are there decisions that I can make instead of just reactions? I tend to just, play on my phone until I get tired enough that I start drifting off, and then I fall asleep. But did I really get good quality sleep if I was staring at a screen up to the last minute? Or should I let my brain unwind a little bit without the screen and learn to go through those natural rhythms of falling asleep? And can I create a sleep routine where I'm making specific decisions of what helps my brain realize that it's bedtime and it's time to go to sleep? And so make small 1% changes and make concrete decisions in those areas, and we tend to see a lot more success. So if there's a tip that I could have is review your personal patterns and see what are the decisions that I can make now that help me know what to do in those moments, so that in those moments I'm making those decisions that I want to make that are in line with my goals. And you'll see that in all of those different patterns, we start thriving, and it just is this snowball effect where we start seeing success in all of the patterns. Once we start becoming more well rested, I'm more likely to exercise with full energy, and I'm more likely to eat a healthy diet if I'm exercising well, and so on and so forth. So,
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
that's the idea. They're all interrelated, and as you build those patterns and recognize those decisions that you're making, you'll see a lot of success there.
Okay. Sweet. So, how can our listeners reach you to learn more about how you can help them with these 6 patterns, or really any other ways to really help us all be in a position where we can continue to ride our mountain bikes well into, potentially our 80s?
Right, 80s, 90s, and beyond. Right.
Yeah. How do we get a hold of you?
So the best way is to follow us on social or to check out our website. So our social, Body Smart PT on Instagram, on Facebook, where there is Body Smart or Cameron Garber. You can look me up as well. And then bodysmart.life is our website. So bodysmart.life. And
Gotcha.
feel free to fill out one of those things where you can hop on a call with us, and we'd love to chat with you about how we can help.
Okay, that sounds great.
Well, that's another lap around the bike park for Aging on Dirt. I hope you've learned something and or found this entertaining. Most importantly, go out and apply what you've learned so you can experience more joy on your bike. Remember, Joel wants your input. What topics and or guests do you want to hear? Reach out to him where you're listening to the podcast, on Facebook, or find his email/phone on his coaching website, jzmtb.com. Until next time, have fun and be safe out there.